Welcome to the Visible Art of Translation podcasts. This series of podcasts are part of the EU-funded INCREC project. Our focus is creativity, translation, and technology in literary and audiovisual translation. Our goal with this series is to give visibility to the often invisible skills, role, and voice of professional translators. Thank you, Guillermo, for taking the time to come and talk to us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Guillermo Parra is a translator, subtitler, reviewer, lecturer in translation, and also audiovisual translation, and researcher. He's based between Menorca and Quebec. He translates from English, German, and French into Spanish and Catalan. And he has translated films and series for large streaming platforms such as Netflix and Amazon, as well as for festivals such as the Americana Film Festival. He also runs the Spanish podcast En Sincronía with Blanca Arias Badia and Damián Santilli. And he has been nominated for 6 ATRAE awards for subtitling. ATRAE is the Spanish Association for Audiovisual Translation. Welcome, Guillermo. I wanted to start by you telling us a bit about yourself. For example, how did you decide to be a translator?
Well, thank you for the introduction. I wanted to become, I wanted to study chemistry, like not translation. That was something that I had in mind when I was in high school. But my parents my parents showed me that I just had I idealized what chemistry could be, and I hadn't really thought about what it would entail in my life. And so it was like a romanticized vision. And they told me, "You're really good at languages. You should try something language related." And I mean, I wasn't just good. I have been studying English and German for many years. Yeah, so I decided to study translation, and I think it was by the third year that I discovered that translating films and mostly films, I would say, because back then I didn't watch that many shows, that many TV series, but it was the thing. So I didn't know when I joined when I started studying translation that could be one of the options. So I immediately got hooked. Like I really liked the idea of watching movies that I had translated myself, and also interacting with them in a different way, in a deeper way. And yeah, so from the third year during my bachelor's degree, I started to read about it, and to every time I could, I would focus. Like if I had to choose different tasks at school, I would choose the one that's audiovisual translation related. And when I finished, I knew that I liked teaching, but I also knew that it was a good way of taking my time to get into the industry. So yeah, I really took it one step at a time. That's something I wanted to point out, that sometimes you just finish the degree and you think like, oh yeah, I want to be working for this company and for this other company. And it wasn't like that for me. It took me like 6 years while I was doing my master's, my PhD, and I was teaching, and I was doing plenty of things. And at the same time, I was working for the Americana Film Festival that you mentioned, and I was doing some things for smaller clients, until I had a good opportunity to start being a freelancer translator.
Our profession is not very well known. So how would you explain what AVT is and what you do?
I'm one of the people that allows viewers from anywhere in the world to watch content that was produced anywhere else in the world in a language that they don't speak. So if you can go to the cinema and watch the latest movie that came out, it's because there was a translator behind it. You don't really think much about it. Like nobody does. I didn't used to do it before studying translation, but yes, somebody's behind that. Somebody's behind those lines. Even when you quote a movie, one of your favorite movies, one of your favorite TV shows, you're actually quoting the translator, or you're probably quoting as well the dubbing adaptator if it was dubbed. I'm one of the few people to watch things before anyone else, so I'm lucky in that sense. But at the same time, you watch it's not like a regular it's not like a regular viewer, so you have to really watch it deep, think about it, and reflect and take some time. Some of those projects are really enjoyable. Some of them aren't that great to translate. They are better for they're better to watch than to translate. So the basic idea is that whatever you consume, if it was not in your language, it had to be translated by someone, and that someone is us.
During your experience translating for platforms and translating for festivals, do you have a favorite movie or a favorite series that you really enjoy translating? And if so, why is it your favorite?
It's hard to choose one because in the last few years I've worked on more than 200 projects, so it's quite a lot of work. And I really, there are some projects that I really enjoy. Perhaps the most well known, the most watched as well, the one that it took me the longest to complete, and it's also one that feels very special to me, was the first season of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, which I subtitled into Catalan. And I've always been a fan of the story. I didn't read the books because like when the movies came out, I was pretty young. I just watched the movies. I love the movies. I watched them like 3 times in the cinema. And so I was a fan. I knew all the quotes. I knew all the conflicts in Middle Earth. And when I heard that this show was going to be released, in a way, to me, I thought, oh, it would be amazing if they gave me to subtitle. And the good thing is that one of the companies that I work for, actually sent everyone like an Excel. Well, it was like a form. It was a form asking how much we knew about something like that, without giving much information about it, because it was obviously confidential. And so yeah, I said everything. I said that I loved translating fantasy, and that I loved world building and things like that, and that I loved the Middle Earth and the Lord of the Rings. And it happened to be at the Lord of the Rings show, so they thought, okay, well, you have to translate it then.
And tell me, have the books been translated into Catalan? I imagine so.
Yes, they have. I hadn't read it, so I had to get all of them, and I didn't have time to read them entirely, but I was checking. So every time like a specific location came out, or a character, so I would go to the books and I would check, like, has this been mentioned earlier? What's the story behind this character or this place? So I had to do a lot of research.
Yeah, and there are songs and there are things that are already add to the difficulties, aren't there?
Yes, but to me well, also the most difficult part was also trying to achieve it's a level, it's a register of the language that you don't use on a daily basis. So you hear elves speaking, and they have been alive for millennia, so they speak in a very ancient English, you could say, or and it has to be like that in Catalan. So I wasn't really familiar with that way of speaking, so I had to read a lot. What I did is, I didn't have time to read the books but I read them after working on the show, in case there was a season 2. So yeah, it took a lot of time.
And the main difficulties, you mentioned characterization, obviously, that Tolkien, even in English, right, had certain characteristics that are not standard English. So was this the main difficulty? So what do you recall in this subtitling or in any other job that to you are the most difficult things?
I would say that puns tend to be very difficult to translate, but at the same time, I'm very, very used to translating puns. So like I have my own way of approaching them. So
And what is this way?
what is this way? You read it or you listen to it, you make sure that you understand the pun, you make sure that you understand what it means, like if it's something that relies on something else that is not mentioned, or if both things are mentioned and what is the connection. So you figure out what the pun is about, and then you leave your computer and you go somewhere else and you do something completely different, like I don't know, like going for a walk or like doing something manual, like not translation. And while you're doing that and you keep thinking about the pun that you memorized and that you really understood, then some ideas come up, and that's how you start thinking, okay, so I could do this, or I could do that, or I could try with this expression in Spanish that would be better. So I have my own process for that, and I always find some kind of solution. Like it's about
Even
thinking.
if in the beginning you think this is untranslatable, right? There is always a solution
Yeah,
in the end.
you may be more or less satisfied with the solution depending on the time that you had to think about it, and sometimes you deliver the file and then you come up with the best, like a better solution even than the one you used. But what I meant is that I'm already used to that process, so in a way it was really a matter of taking time for that. But what the Lord of the Rings had that it was very difficult for me is that I didn't have that knowledge in me. Like I don't know how people 100 years ago or hundreds of years ago express themselves. I read some classics at high school, in high school, but it's not something that you do on a daily basis. Not even translating. It was a learning process, not just a translating process.
So you were mentioning your sort of strategy, translation strategy to translate puns. And I was curious to know, how would you define a creative translation or creativity in translation?
To me, good translations need to be creative if they are of fiction, and if they are for, like, at least in the audiovisual field, they have to be. I'm sure in literary translation, translators will feel the same way. Um, Perhaps there are other areas of translation where that creativity is not as necessary, or even not needed. It's not even a good thing in a way. So if you're translating a legal document, you don't want people to be creative. You want them to be very, very serious about it and very precise. So in the field where I work, so doing subtitling, you have to be creative, and to me that means trying to come up with a dialogue, because you're in a way working with like a dialogue writer in the target language. So you have to come up with things that someone would have said if that product had been done in your language. So you have to try to find spontaneous solutions, and think about how people talk, at least in Spain, in Spanish from Spain. I know in Latin America it's more difficult, because you have to translate the way nobody talks.
Oh, you mean about neutral
Neutral
Spanish?
Spanish, which is counterintuitive. We're lucky in that sense, because in Spain you think, oh yeah, like how would my grandma talk, and you try to come up with expressions they use when you were a kid, or how would this person reminds me of my uncle, so I'm gonna like he's going to speak like my uncle in a way. So you find the expressions and a way of characterizing, and to me that's very creative. That's also very personal in a way, but you only do that when you have time, when you are paid properly, when you're in the right mindset, which is not always the case, I'm afraid. Like I try to only accept things that I feel comfortable I can do, and I can do well with them, like my at my level of quality, which I try that it's always very, very high. But so yeah, and to me also that way of finding creativity comes when you take the time to analyze, or to at least to read your translation, because one thing that uh, students, I'm a teacher as well, as you mentioned. So one thing is that students do when they're learning how to translate is to just do it in one, like they sit, they start, they finish the translation, and that's it. So there's no reviewing process, so it's full of spelling mistakes or things like that. And there's also no like, they don't take the time to read their translation. If it's subtitles, you have to read them on their own and make sure that they work on their own without listening to the audio, because that way you feel if something's missing. You can see if
You mean reading the
the
target
target, yeah, the
text,
target,
the one that you have
exactly.
produced, reviewing your target text.
Like, so the reviewing, which can be done with some checks, and some things are more or less automatic, but rereading your text.
So in a way, there has to be, from what you are saying, there is a creative component that we in research have looked at, which is this visualization component in translators, that when they are creating, they imagine a conversation like you were talking about your grandmother. So there is
Yes.
this component of visualizing another world with the
Yes,
same setting.
and why would I have said in this context? Why would this person have said if they spoke Spanish? And that's inherently creative.
Yeah, very. It's almost like creating a parallel film in a
In some
way.
cases, yeah. In some cases, I have felt like another dialogue writer, and especially with humor, like you have to come up with something that is funny in Spanish, because otherwise, what's the point of watching that product? If it's not funny, there's no point. You're just doing it for the money.
Yeah, maybe this is an easy answer. I don't know, but in your view, also because you are a lecturer, so you are reviewing a lot of translations, but also because as part of your job, you review other subtitlers. So what makes, in your opinion, a translation outstanding in your field?
Okay. To me, like I've reviewed a couple of translators in the last couple of weeks that were amazing, really, really, really good, and I love working like that, because you're reading it and you feel like something, everything has an intention, everything has a why, and if you can see the why, there's probably a note explaining you how they reached that decision, so that you know, and avoid changing something if it's unnecessary. So you can really tell. It's not about not being literal, but as I was saying, if you want it to feel spontaneous, as if someone was speaking in that language, it's usually not literal, even if that literal solution exists. So even if like just a loan translation from English exists and is something that can be said, would it be said that often? Would it be said in that context? Perhaps not. So, for example, a good way, like I remember opening that was longer ago, that was last year. I remember opening a movie, and I found that there were a specific, yeah, it was Oh My God. Oh My God was translated as Dios mío 40 something times. Like in the entire movie, characters would say Dios mío 40 times. Like no way, no way. Like you can claim that it's an expression that exists in Spanish. So finding a movie that's full of Dios mío, to me that's the opposite. So that's a bad sign. That means I need to look carefully at the rest of the translation, because that means they didn't think much about certain things, you know. So as a reviewer, that's a red light to me. So, and I remember out of those 40, I may have left 10. So everything else was changed into something different, an exclamation of some kind, like context related. So you change it for something you would say specifically in that context, which is the idea. Like so again, it's creative, but this is also like, this can be explained by the fact that some companies already worked with machine translation. So machine translation will always give you Dios mío as a translation for oh my God.
Yeah, and they ask you not to change it necessarily, right? So you're not supposed to change it if you're post-editing unless it's terribly wrong.
Yeah, well, that really depends. I wouldn't say the end client wants you not to touch the translation. The end client perhaps doesn't even know, or as long as they receive the product, they don't think much about it. I would say it's the company that has the entire platform
Distribution.
and yeah, so the LSP basically. So those would be the ones who would say, okay, don't change something if it's subjective, because it gives us too much work. I don't know. Like if it's improving the test,
But it's related to pricing as well, right? Because if it's
obviously. So it's cutting corners and cutting fees. So that's also one of the reasons why most translators complain about machine translation, AI, like any sort of technology that is used not to complement what we're doing and to help us do it better, but to cut costs and do it worse.
And indeed, in the research that we have done at the University of Groningen, we have seen this, that post-editing machine translation, at least in literary texts, certainly constrains the professionals, which is different than a student, the professional's creativity. But talking about technology, and you did mention that you do have to do a lot of research when you are translating, particularly creative content. So I wanted to ask you, what sources do you use?
Okay, so I use a lot of corpora.
Okay.
So let's say I'm translating a movie that takes place in the 1960s. I wasn't alive in the 1960s. I don't know how they spoke back then. So I can watch a movie from the 1960s. I can like translate it or not translate it. I can watch it in the original language. So it was a Spanish movie from the 60s to see how they spoke. I can read something, but I don't usually have time to read a book. So let's say, yeah, I just watch a movie. I can check in corpora. So I would say, it was this expression or this word used back then, because maybe it wasn't. I remember this is something from another project. It was Mank, project from David Fincher. It was released on Netflix, and I was doing the reviewing for that project. And the translation was amazing. Like I felt that it was done by one of the greatest audiovisual translators in Spain. It is Maria Jose Aguirre de Carter. She's now retired, and she's been translating for over 30 years, or I don't know, maybe 40 years. And so I was reviewing her work and touching as little as possible, but paying attention to a lot of things. And one thing that caught my attention was that back in Spain, we use vale for everything. Like it's our okay, right? So we say vale, and it applies to any context, and it's something you would say all the time. But that movie Mank is based in the 1920s, and people wouldn't say vale back then. So you have to be careful, and that means that you cannot use something that you would naturally use in any other translation. So you have to watch movies from the period. You have to check as I was saying, in a corpus. Was this used back then? No, it wasn't.
Maybe we can explain a little bit what a corpus is, for if we have listeners that are not translators.
So basically you go to, well, now everything is online. There are other corpora, I guess, that are not online, but you go to a web page that has a database of texts in the original language and their translations. Or you can just check one with text in a source or target language. So you can check a corpus in English. So you can see a corpus of the use of English. So you can make searches and find whether a specific expression or is used in that language or not. If it uses one preposition or another one. If it was used 100 years ago or not.
So what was used in the 1920s instead of vale?
Bien.
Bien.
Bien or
Okay.
something else, but not vale. And that was
Okay, interesting.
so. Yeah, machine translation will never be able to help with that, I'm afraid. The thing is that whenever there's something like, so especially period translation, they get it wrong all the time, at least right now. Because but the thing is, you can also ask the question, which I understand that makes sense to ask. Would that mean that all translators are going to translate that period piece correctly, or in a way that's feels realistic or believable? Well, not really. Like, you have to be very skilled to do it right. I'm not saying that like I'm more skilled than anybody else, but like it's not easy. So it's not easy for humans, and it's definitely not achievable right now for a machine. It really depends on the expectations of the client and the expectations of the audience. If the expectations are low, like anything goes, a machine translation would go.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is that at least for now, the expectations are higher and the standards are higher. I would also say that it really depends on when you're consuming things. So if it's a platform that you pay for, obviously the requirements need to be like, the quality needs to be as good as it can be. But on social media, people are used to seeing like shitty videos done, like no matter how, subtitled with the worst subtitles I've ever seen. And people are getting used to that. One of my fears is that people get used to that in other contexts. So that would definitely, yeah, of course, in that case, you could say, oh yeah, machine translation or artificial intelligence can do anything, because nobody will notice. So that's also like I came up with the expression Spanish with a thousand words. What I meant when I coined that concept was similar to what people used to sell when teaching English. They would say like, "Oh, I have a method, and you can learn English with 1,000 words, and you can communicate," which is great. Like, I mean, you know no English, you know zero, you learn 1,000 words, you know how to use them, and you can suddenly communicate with people, at least at a basic level. That's great. Yeah,
At a
basic,
basic level, I
very
would say.
basic. But yeah, that if we translate with 1,000 words, because it's basically what the machine translation comes up with, and what people who don't have time to research, or are not getting paid to research or to read, or uh, to become more proficient at their profession, if they use 1,000 words, so we'll all get used to to the Spanish with 1,000 words. That was my point.
It's very tricky, and I wanted to ask you if there, because we are considering here that machine translation translates directly, and then somebody has to post-edit whatever that output is. But do you yourself use machine translation in any other
Yes.
way to check things?
Yes.
Tell me about it.
I want to clarify that I'm not against, like, most translators are not against technology. I'm not a neo-Luddite, that's how they call it. So I'm not going to break technology. I don't need, like, technology has made things much easier. Subtitling 10 years ago was very different from what it is now. And imagine, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, I wasn't subtitling back then, but some people were. And unnecessarily time consuming. So in that sense, it's amazing that we have the technology we have right now, and that we don't have to wait for a VHS to reach our home so that we can work on a specific project, which is what some people have told me. So I'm all in. Like, I like technology, and I just think it needs to be used properly and in a way that makes sense. For example, I don't know Italian, or I don't know Portuguese, or I don't know other languages, but sometimes a client of mine needs me to take care of an Italian project. And well, you could say no, of course, but if it's a client that only relies on you and you solve all their problems, which is a way of getting job, like so people complain about certain things, but you have to be a problem solver for your client. I mean a small client. So if they have an Italian movie that they need to translate, I don't translate it. I either look for help, which something as I have done. Sometimes I have done, but you can also find solutions. So what do you have? Maybe you have an English translation, a template. So you start working from that. But I always request the transcription of the original language. So if it's Italian, please send me the transcript of what they're saying, or the dialogue list, or the script, whatever you have. So that way I can use machine translation. Well, I can first read it, which in the case of Italian or languages that are close to Spanish really helps. I can also look for those for those words, the words they're using in an Italian Spanish dictionary. Even though I don't speak Italian, I can copy paste an Italian word. I don't know if a verb, so the conjugation of verbs, I don't know how it works. So if you copy paste a sentence in Google Translate, you will probably not get it right. And of course you get the feeling of what they literally said in Italian, which also helps reinterpret the English template, so that you can get a translation that is as close as possible to what was being said without the English in the middle.
In the subject of technology, I always like to ask that if you had like a magic wand and you could ask for the technology that it will really, really help you as an audiovisual subtitler, what technology would you come up with, or what technology would you invent?
Okay, I've heard of translators who work, they don't type anymore. So these are very, very pro. So they just dictate their translation, and they have their own programs for doing that, which I have never been able to do. So I know that exists, but for some clients, it's not that you don't have the choice. So you have to use their tools. So you have to work the way they want to do things. But I don't know, like for example, being able to dictate my translation, even if I'm working for Netflix with their own platform, or having easier access to materials that are not. So we know that piracy is a problem. It's always going to be a problem. I don't know how they're gonna fix that, but the problem for us translators is that sometimes we cannot work in the right conditions. So we have a copy that's rotoscoped, so you can only see black and the faces of the characters whenever there's a face. If there's no face, well, you can just see it black, or the quality of the video is very poor. Another thing that I would like to do is, I haven't been able to do it. Perhaps I could do it myself. Like, it's just a matter of taking the time. But I would say, I don't know. I know 20, 30 translators that I really admire, that I think are really great. Like, finding everything they've done and collected and doing my own corpus of their translations, so that I have it at hand, so that I can check how would this person that I really admire deal with this. That would be amazing.
I'm aware of time, so I wanted to kind of close with a question that we got from one student, and the question was, if machine translation replaces professionals, as the media sometimes seems to imply, what would a world without translators look like?
It will be the future of the Spanish with 1,000 words. Basically, that's what it looks like to me. If machine translation is created using texts that are already poorly written, and it's fitting itself with poorly written text, and everybody's just consuming poorly translated text, and speaking the language of social media and WhatsApp. So it wouldn't be a great world, a great future, in my opinion. Not because we won't know what to do with our lives. We'll probably figure out something else that we can do. There's always.
When you say we, you mean translators?
I mean translators. Yeah, I'm speaking about, like, of course I'm worried about my future, and I want to have work and everything, but still, it would be like knowing that it can be done great, and that it can really enrich. Like, watching a movie that has great subtitles is such a great experience, because I feel, at least as a viewer, I feel I enjoyed more. I learn more. Oh yeah, I hadn't seen that expression in a while. So it feels, in a way, it's like reading. Like what will happen to a society that doesn't read? It's not great. Like if that's the future, yeah, I'm not happy about that future. I hope it doesn't become a reality.
Okay, thank you very much, Guillermo, for
Thank you.
participating in our podcast.
It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you again to our invited speaker, and to our listeners. Thank you for being there, and feel free to share our podcasts with your family, friends, and colleagues. This is part of a series of podcasts of the EU-funded INCREC project. So follow us for more episodes, and please share your comments on this platform. See you next time.